got Dave Mazza, Chief Strategy Officer of Roundhill Investments, joining us now for for a look at that and a discussion about Mag 7 and what that looks like, and in general the broadening out that we've been seeing. So let's start out with a conversation about NVIDIA. Although it finished lower for the day, it had some wins this week, although basically little change this week. What are your takeaways when it comes to NVIDIA off the back of its latest numbers and its forecast?
Yeah, and I think the forecast is really the most important point here, right? Because under any way, shape, or form, this company had delivered incredible results. But it's interesting, it's the first time in over 5 quarters the company grew less than 100%, their revenue less than 100% year over year. So the market took it a bit softly that it could only do around 90%. Now the forecast is where things get more interesting. We know that they've made it clear that in the fourth quarter they're going to be shipping Hopper and Blackwell systems. But of course, the market's now getting a little bit concerned are we going to see people sort of slow down their spending purchases? It doesn't appear as though that the hyperscalers look to be doing that for the time being. If anything, they told us that they were ramping up. So again, this is a name with so much expectations, so many people are following it, but it generally delivered. I think the challenge is that it didn't deliver above and beyond enough to really see the stock take a new leg higher for now.
Yeah, and I think one of the questions that had come up on the earnings call was about their margins, which of course are strong, but not quite as strong as they had been. And if they were going to be returning to the mid-70s when it comes to that, they said, yes, that would be the case. So that's why we did see a little bit of momentum off the back of their numbers. We saw, again, some tapering today. When we look at where the price action is today, what's the level you're paying attention to when it comes to the path from here? Where's the floor that you're seeing, or resistance that you're seeing?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So NVIDIA is in a position where, because there's been, again, so much baked into the stock that almost, kind of traditional technical measures don't always do a good job of sort of guiding us. But resistance is firmly at 150. That's something that's been in place. It's flirted with that really throughout the month. It's had a hard time breaking through. I also look at the 137 mark. That's the interim low. It's kind of a good line in the sand of support here, because again, looking at just traditional 50 or 200-day moving averages doesn't really do it for this name because there's just so many people following it.
Okay, and then let's broaden things out and talk about the Mag 7, especially when we think about the broadening out that we've seen in gains. It was not about leadership. We just looked at the close, the NASDAQ 100. That was not the leader today. It has been the leader in the past. We saw blue chips catching a bid, a Dow closing at a record today, small caps gaining ground. What are you paying attention to when it comes to this broadening out? Do you expect it to continue throughout the balance of the year, or does Mag 7 matter as much as it did, say, the beginning half of this year and even last year compared to where we'll finish this year?
Yeah, so of course, the Mag 7 really came on incredibly strong in 2023, contributing over 50%, really 63% of S&P 500 returns in that calendar year. This year, it's around 45%, so still a significant influence. I don't think these names are going anywhere. To be quite clear, I think they're going to continue to be of interest to investors. But at this point, I think the market is trying to digest all the recent earnings that we've seen, and then, of course, some of the headline risks that are coming. We know, of course, the news about Alphabet and the Chrome browser there really weighing on Alphabet shares this week. We know there's concerns about some sort of other antitrust regulatory issues with Amazon in Europe. So, again, these names, I think, are going to be driven a bit more sort of by sentiment, by headlines, as we really digest the still robust earnings and what that's going to mean for 2025. Now, when I think about kind of sector performance, if we look at least through the end of the year into year end, I think we really have this animal spirits that's still in place. So investor sentiment remains incredibly positive. I expect to see somewhat of a broadening. The challenge, though, with the Russell 2000 for its sustained sort of leadership, or for this rotation that we've seen time and time again, to actually stick for once, is that, again, these companies are actually quite challenged when we look at their balance sheets. their debt to equity, really low profit margins. Nearly 50% of the Russell 2000 is a so-called zombie company where they don't have the cash flow to kind of pay their obligations. And when we have an environment, if we're going to see higher interest rates than maybe we had expected, because the Fed is not going to be able to decrease interest rates, either because the economy remains strong, inflation is just stubborn to get down to their preferred 2%, or President-elect Trump's policies come into play quickly and it becomes inflationary, or the deficit increases, it's going to be hard for the Fed to keep an aggressive cutting path. So I actually think that group remains a bit challenged into 2025, but there's still opportunities for the bank, along with banks, and then industrials is another sector, particularly under President-elect Trump's policies, that we think could catch a bid.
So you think Midcap is a better place when you say compare it to, say, the Russell, especially given some of the companies that are within that metric or that benchmark?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Just because of the way it's constructed, and there's not kind of as we know, there's not a wave of IPOs or exciting companies to kind of come into the Russell 2000, grow with it, and then graduate out. Most of the best companies have now graduated out. They're in large cap indices, and you're left with sort of a hodgepodge of regional banks, biotech, and then really kind of a smattering of companies that do just about everything, but again, with relatively unhealthy balance sheets. But yeah, actually, it's interesting. Midcaps is a space that's totally forgotten. Most people don't have it on their radars. But if you actually look at the attractiveness from a valuation standpoint with relatively favorable growth characteristics, that's certainly an area that we think could see some positive returns going forward. If everything falls into place, because for now, the Magnificent Seven has been a bit of offense and a bit of defense. But if we get into an environment where it becomes a bit more of an all clear signal, then yeah, I think you're going to see more broadening into areas that aren't just where you can kind of hang out in the mega caps to kind of grind out returns from at least some portion of the group, right? Whether, earlier this year, Tesla wasn't working pretty sharply. That has come back. Of course, NVDA has been strong all year. Meta was doing well, but then people were pointing to a name like Apple. So that's sort of the interesting thing of why we think about that as a group, of kind of how they can actually all work together, even if they're having somewhat disparate returns throughout the year.
And then really quickly, in like 30 seconds or less, Dave, if you could tell me if your expectation, given the uncertainty about the Fed's position on interest rates in the December meeting, looking like a coin toss when we see with regard to another rate cut, are you expecting a continuation of risk on through the balance of the year, given that uncertainty?
Yeah, no, I think especially if we get a cut, it's really risk on through year end. And then, of course, the question marks about 2025, I think will get pushed off until 2025.
All right, great. You did a great job getting that in 30 seconds. Dave Mazza, Chief Strategy Officer, Round Hill Investments. Thank you, Dave. Have a great weekend.